yeah, race setups, these little guys. It's about time I got to this. I thought I'd do a bit of a beginner's kind of guide to these shortboard setups and kind of go through them. Yeah, if you ride a descent and rogues and don't really know how to do stand-up toe sides, this video is probably going to be a little cringe for you because you're probably way better than me at skateboarding. But if you're wondering why longboards are now shorter than skateboards, this would probably, hopefully, be kind of helpful. Yeah, if you're new to skating, if you don't really know what gear is what, and you're seeing these boards around, you're wondering what the deal is, hopefully I can kind of help you out a little bit. I'm no expert rider. I'm no real downhill raging racer by any means. Like, I only put the setup together in the spring this year and just been spending time skating it just this summer, really, a few times here and there. I only really raced like once or twice, and that's like raced, but I have been riding it a lot. I've been learning a lot about it, dialing it in, feeling really good on it. And yeah, I kind of thought I would do a video breaking down these small setups, specifically going through my board and how it feels for me and my experience on it, and trying to kind of explain why the things are the way they are, if that makes sense. But yeah, these setups are mainly oriented for racing, but I guess you could also call that like race-styled skating. So maximum grip, trying to get the tightest, fastest line you can through corners, just going fast, taking the best line, basically, just balls to the wall raging. That's what these small, big-wheeled, crazy-looking weapon machinery setups are all about. So with that being said, they're kind of oriented towards mostly hands-down slides, staying in tuck leaning through corners, small stance, you know, quite compact for that aerodynamic kind of stance and form. They're not really designed with the idea of having fun. Fun in a broad sense is in like, they're designed for a specific type of skating, and that doesn't mean it's not fun, it's just that's the specific type of skating these are really orientated for. Personally, I also don't think these are good setups for beginners. I think you need to kind of have most of the basics of skating down to really get a hold of this kind of skateboard. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to learn on than, say, just having some symmetrical wider trucks on a slightly bigger board. But yeah, I'm just going to basically in this video go through my setup, kind of talk about each part of the board individually, explain like why this makes the setup better for that race style skating. And yeah, at the end I'll probably give just a brief how I found it. It's good, it's fun basically, but yeah, and then we'll get into a little bit more detail about why I think it's going to be not so good as a beginner board. Yeah, my setup, I'm riding the Rocket Werewolf. I've got Valkyrie slaloms and currently have Venom mags on. I also have big scythe footstock, got the Venom torque lock on the back, and I'm rocking seismic locked on grip tape. I wanted to take it pretty seriously and put a setup together that had as many of the aspects of these race boards as I could. Realistically, I'm only missing, like, some people have screws through their board for extra grip. The latest thing is weights. People are starting to mess with weights, which we'll talk a bit about later. Yeah, other than that, I kind of went all out, trying to really have a good go at this race type boards. Yeah. So the Werewolf from Rocket Skateboards, it's pretty sure it's 31.5 inches long, 8.9 inches wide. It's got wheelbase options of 20.7 to 23.6 inches. It's got big fat wheel wells routed out, which is nice. The front's got these big flares. It's got pretty, I would say, medium concave, a little bit of W concave at the back. Again, you never see the concave in these shots, but there is W at the back there. Wheel wells at the back too for that fat wheel clearance. Pretty light, pretty small. The reason I went with the Rocket Werewolf is I like concave, so this has a decent amount of concave compared to a lot of boards out there. It's not the smallest because I didn't really want to commit to a tiny board, but it's still that 8.9 inch width, which is getting on the narrower side, and it's only 30 inches, like 31 inches long, and it's got those wheelbase options to get you right down to around 20, which is kind of in that range of where you want to be on these small boards. So the reason you want the narrower boards is because you're going to be running a narrower track width on your trucks and wheels, which we'll get to when we get to that. So you want that narrow. It gives you a bit more leverage on the edges. It means you don't have to move your feet as much when you're transitioning from like toe to heel side or from doing a drift into tucking and vice versa. So you want that little narrow width. I also didn't want to have to worry about wheel bite, especially with riding these massive wheels. So the flares were really appealing to me, especially because you got more of your movement in the front truck and you're more likely to wheel bite in the front, and the wheel wells are real meaty. So I don't even have to ride risers on this setup, and I've got tons of clearance. Never even thought about wheel bite on this, so that's awesome in that regard. I also liked that it's got a little bit of rocker, but it doesn't have micro drops, and I'm used to riding boards with drops, and that means you can get your front foot right up over that front truck, so you have like full control and full leverage over your front truck, which is cool. And at the back, even with the W, it's actually flat enough that you can put your torque block in and it will sit down pretty nicely with not too much of an issue. The slight W just makes it a little bit easier to really have a good pocket in there, so you really have grip on your back foot. So yeah, that's kind of why I went with that board, and that's kind of why this board is oriented to this type of skating. So for trucks, I went with the Valkyrie MK2 DH slaloms. These trucks are 115 to 125 millimeters spaceable. I'm running them with a 45 plate in the front, and I actually have the adjustable plate from Valkyrie in the back, which gives you options from 15 to 40 in 5-degree increments, and I'm running it at 20 degrees in the rear. The slalom trucks from Valkyrie also have split rake, so I've got 5 degrees of rake in the front and just 3 degrees in the back. The reason I chose Valkyries is that I'm actually been riding Valkyrie trucks for years on my other setup anyway, so I kind of wanted to stick with a similar company, but I actually really like the design. You may have noticed like the bushings aren't in line. I don't know how easily you can see. They're kind of almost next to each other. They call that the coplanar bushing design, and basically that makes your center point way more defined and way more stable, and I just find these trucks to be immensely stable, but they're also very lively, so you get a lot of movement with a lot of stability, and I personally love the trucks forever, so I stuck with the company and went to their slalom version. They also look sick, like they're just sick looking trucks, and yeah, they're cool. Okay, so the reason with these race setups that you want to go really narrow in width, if you don't know, kind of the standard width truck like 5 years ago was 180 millimeters. A lot of people on 160 now, that seems to be the sweet spot, but these are all the way down at 115 or 125. I'm running mine at 125. But the purpose of that is grip. So when you bring in your tracking width, like the distance between the lips of your wheels, it makes it much grippier. And since we're riding these massive wheels, if you were on a 180 millimeter truck, you know, your wheel's going to be all the way out here. So you're trying to really bring in that track width and to increase the grip, which is the main reason for that. You could also argue that having a narrower hanger gives you more leverage over the wheels, over the turning circle, maybe a tighter radius of your turning circle. I think that is part of it, but I think the predominant reason is for that grip and that tracking width. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of where I think that is. The reason that you have such a big split, you know, a 45 to a 20, and a lot of people actually have a bigger split than that, is you want to have more movement in your trucks in your front truck. And that's because you want to sort of turn by leading the front of your board and having the front following. So having a higher degree makes a truck more turny and more lively, and a lower degree is obviously more dead feeling and less turny. And then you kind of exemplify that by putting in soft bushings at the front and hard bushings at the back. And I've heard people compare it to a car. So when you're turning, you're putting your weight on the front, you're turning with your front foot, and the back's kind of following. And that's going to allow you to take better lines through corners. It's going to make your slides perform a little differently to they would with the symmetrical base plate angles. And the split rate kind of just exemplifies all of that kind of split effect at the same time. It just makes you going to lead with your front foot and the back's kind of going to follow. I'm not sure if this is like an intentional thing or not, but a lower degree is slipperier and a higher degree is grippier. Because it's going to try and turn rather than just slide out. And so what that is also going to do, it's going to make your back wheels slide easier than your front wheels. I'm not sure if that's like a good thing or a bad thing for going faster. I kind of makes sense it would be a good thing, but it means when you're drifting, you're kind of still steering with your front and letting the back slide out a little bit more and sort of follow where you're pointing your front wheels. And those two things combined, the grippiness from the narrow hanger and the front leading the back from the split, it kind of is, I guess, demonstrated in a really snappy slide and being able to take really tight turns. And so one of the other things you can kind of do is when you're tucking and you're going into a turn, you don't have to brake tuck. You can just stay and you can lean right off the board if you're leaning forward enough, and it will just follow through the turn. Whereas on a wide truck or on a sim setup, the board may slide out or it may not have enough lean to really get into that turn. Yeah, and that's kind of the main aspects of the truck that you're kind of thinking about as far as this narrow and the big split is concerned. All right, and wheels. I won't talk too much specifically about these ones, just the Venom Magnums, because there's a few different options out there for wheel. I kind of want to more focus on why this particular size and shape and type of wheel. But I am running the Venom Magnums. These are 78 millimeters, and I have the 76As. Apparently the 74s are better, for everyone says, but I've got the 76s, and they're 70 millimeters wide. They're really big wide wheels. But there are sort of 3 or 4 main companies making these race wheels. They're all similar size to this. They're all similar, you know, types of urethane kind of feeling wheel. And they all have these massive supportive cores and these big fat square lips. You can really see on the inside lips too, these big fat lips. So the main reasons you have these absolute units of wheels is obviously roll speed. A bigger, like heavier kind of wheel is going to get that higher top speed and that to just really get going. But the reason for the big core is also for that roll speed. If you have a nice big core in the middle, it's going to make the wheel actually lighter rather than having urethane in the middle. But it's also supportive, and it's going to stop the wheel from deforming as much. So when a wheel deforms, you think about it, it's urethane, it's still soft. When you're rolling, it could start kind of squishing out and doing weird things. These big supportive cores kind of keep the middle really rigid and let the outside be soft for, you know, rolling. You don't want to be rolling on plastic wheels or anything like that. The other thing the supportive core does is when you go to slide, you've got that same structure in the middle, the same kind of idea of not having urethane all the way to the middle. The middle's, it's not going to deform, it's going to stay rigid, and that means that the slide is going to be a lot more smooth on the edges of the wheel because the wheel's not going to deform as much. You can get into the science about like different companies' urethanes and the ones they use. From my understanding, the kind of main one everyone's using is this high rebound thane, and that's supposedly faster and smoother sliding. I'm not going to really get into all the nitty gritty of that. I'm just talking about the stuff that's easy to understand. But yeah, big wheels, big cores, grippy. That's the main reason. These things are grippy. Obviously, you're going through these turns really fast. You're trying to take the best line you can. You only want to slide as much as you really need to, or you don't want to slide at all. When you're on a big meaty wheel with these big square lips like this, it's going to take a lot more for the wheel to slide. And if you do slide, it's going to slow you down quicker and be easier to hook up. So like, if you put these on just a regular skateboard and you go and you try to just throw a slide, they probably either won't slide or they'll just stop you right away. These aren't really for free riding. Some people argue, you know, you've raced on them, you've worn them in down a bit. All right, guys, that's okay. In general, these things, like, they don't want to slide. So you need to be going pretty quick to really use these how they're supposed to be used, I guess is the best way you could say. But on the flip side of that, if you put on some little freeride wheels and you go like 60 miles an hour into a drift, you're just gonna like get down into your drift and start sliding, and you're gonna stay the same speed and you're gonna go straight off the road, basically. So these things are gonna feel how a freeride wheel would feel at a low speed. That's the point of these big, meaty, square lip wheels. I've probably really over-explained the whole wheel thing, but I know some people get real confused when they see, you know, people riding these absolute massive things compared to the little freeride wheels that we ride when we're leaving Thang lines. But yeah, that's the wheels. Righto, now onto the, I guess you call it the top of the board. So the footstock. I'm rocking a Scythe footstock, massive meaty thing. You can see it fully hooks this way. It's actually got all these grooves to keep your foot in. Foot stops are pretty simple. It's in the name. It stops your foot. So the purpose of this is just really to get your foot really secure on the front of the board, so that when you're sliding, your feet aren't going to move and you don't have to worry about it. It's also pretty handy just for like foot placement. Like if you're racing and you're pushing in on the start line, you want to know that you can just do your push and then get into your tuck. Some people probably don't even look down at their boards these days. They just know how it's supposed to feel and they just shimmy their foot up into where it feels right. The reason that some of these race setups have these big crazy ones, or you know, some of the Australians have like 2 or 3 foot stops on the front, it's just exactly in the name. It's just to stop your foot. So the faster you're going and like the bigger and more square your wheels are, the more sort of resistance you're ending up with when you're pushing for that grip, because you want to just grip around a turn. It means when you go to slide, it's harder to slide. So you can kind of like push into your slides a bit more, and it gives you a bit more leverage as well. But yeah, pretty basic. A lot of people free ride with them as well, just with a more small kind of relaxed one. Yeah, there's nothing too crazy with the footstock. That's not too different. I just bought like the biggest, meatiest, heaviest one there is. Actually, you can buy weights for these. This one came with a weight, so it just puts even more weight in the front of your board. Next thing is the Venom torque block. This is basically like a somewhat hard foam that you can stick onto the back of your board. Bit of a pro tip, if you didn't already know this, it's far more convenient to buy like industrial grade Velcro, and then you can like glue the Velcro, glue or stick the Velcro to your board into the underside of the torque block, and it makes your torque block adjustable so that you can kind of put it down, and if it doesn't feel right, you can move it and adjust it. Very helpful, makes a big difference, because I think the torque block, it kind of comes like grip tape on the back. You can peel it off, it's all sticky, and you can just smack it down. A lot of people will just do that and then grip right up over it, and that's fine if you know where to put it, but if you're trying to figure out a setup, it's really handy to do the Velcro trick. And this industrial grade Velcro, you can see like I'm missing half the grip on this torque block. Like I've come off this board, it's done a couple of flips, it's gone down a couple of banks, and the torque block's held just with Velcro, fine. Not regular Velcro, like industrial grade, but yeah. The purpose of these torque blocks is basically just to give you something else to prop your back foot against. It's kind of like a comfort thing. Well, in tuck, it's nice to be able to push up against something, but have a bit of a reference point, have something to sort of lean on, because tucking is obviously, you know, it can be quite strenuous. You know, you're sort of cramped up in that little thing. So it's nice to have a little bit more of a thing to put your foot against. And because you can place it wherever you want, you can kind of customize it to your stance and your tuck and your style. I I don't really notice it with heel side drifts. I believe my foot is still on it, like my heel is on it, but I don't use it. With toe side drifts, on the other hand, I actually do really feel it. My toe is right in here, and it feels really nice to have that to push off. It's just a little bit more comforting, a little more grip. Feels like I can kind of push the board a bit more. Yeah, those aren't too crazy. They're definitely not a necessary thing, but that's just what it is. The other thing is seismic locked on. Everyone swears by this. You're gonna ask on Longboard Family, you're gonna ask your mate, you're gonna ask the guy in your local skate shop. If they know anything about going fast, they're gonna tell you to get locked on. Main reason for that is it's just like the grippiest grip tape there is. People also argue it wears out, like takes the longest to wear out compared to other brands, which is a big benefit. And I gotta say, like I've sworn by Vicious for years, probably like 7 years at this point. I'm like, nah, Vicious is the best, Vicious is the best. And on my other board, I actually have been skating in this type of mindset because I've been riding this board in a more aggressive, you know, I guess that's the main word, aggressive mindset of skating. And I've put board points on the grip in one season of skating from Fresh Fishes. So I've kind of had to concede that point and agree with, you know, this is probably the best grip that's out there for racing. So that's why most people riding these boards are riding it locked on. You can't really go wrong with it. There's a couple of things you should know about gripping it, but you can probably look up a review or something. It's just you want to heat it up and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's why you're running this big, really aggressive grip tape. Again, not too different from normal longboarding, like downhill longboarding, but it is something of note that you really want to maximize your grip. A couple of extra things that I haven't mentioned yet is some people will put screws through their board, and so they'll actually put them from the underside, screw through, just far enough that the points of the screws will stick out on their board, and that gives the same effect as grip tape, but just even more extreme. You know, you've got points of metal sticking out, your feet are gonna really sit on them. Not as common, but you do see it around a little bit. I mean, I'm not trying to drill holes through my board, so I haven't done that, but I understand the purpose of that. Another thing for grip is people ride brake soles or grip soles, which is like effectively rubber that you glue to the sole of your shoe, and that's going to make your foot grip to the board even more. It also means you can foot brake and you're not going to wear through your shoe as fast. They are a lot more durable than the sole of a shoe. Personally, I haven't tried it yet. I mostly free ride, and I really enjoy having a bit of board feel. People will argue that you don't lose board feel. The other thing is, like, these kind of setups, you don't really move your feet, so once they're in, that's where they are. And I think it makes sense in a setup like this. I just haven't tried it myself, so I can't really comment on that much more. I don't know if it's really worth mentioning in this video, but weights have become quite popular with longboarding now. People will attach some form of weight to the underneath of the board. I mean, we've seen like hammerheads, common ones, diving weights. Like, there was a photo of someone with a brick. So I've kind of been trying to figure it out and look into it a bit. I haven't tried it myself yet. I do plan to. I'll probably make a video about that when I get around to it. I'm not certain that it really improves racing and race style skating. From what I understand, it makes a big difference for how the board slides. I don't know. I'm not the person to ask about that yet. I'm going to try it. I'll figure it out. We'll get to that later. Yeah, it's been really fun riding this setup. I've been really enjoying it. Trying to ride it more and more. I do find that it's most fun when you're skating fast. When you're skating fast and doing some kind of technical type skating where you can really feel the benefits of it. Because personally for me, I'm not going to try and stand up slide on this setup. I'm not really going to ride if I'm putzing around on a little free ride hill. It's not what it's designed for. This thing was super fun. If you ever go to, like, I don't know, wherever you live, you have mountains and you can go and skate some mountain roads. If you can go and skate some faster double yellow roads, if you're going to go to a big event or a race, this thing is what you're going to want to ride. I've managed to get out quite a few times this year to some pretty stuff, and it's been perfect. Mary Hill was a great example. There's not even any drifts there, and this thing was just so much fun at Mary Hill. It was great. They're very snappy. The slides are super snappy. You feel almost like a robot. It's like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's super fun for that. It's that whole front, like leading the back type thing. It's a different type of skating. You have to use different form for your slides. You have to really adjust and make a difference for the type of skating you're doing and in the way you're doing it. Yeah, I wouldn't really recommend it for beginners. If you've only been skating a year or two, you mostly free ride, you haven't really ridden square lug wheels, you're riding symmetrical trucks, it's probably not the best idea to just sit up one of these guys and go and skate. I mean, you'll figure it out, you'll be able to slide, you'll be able to ride, but if you don't have those basic, like, good form, low angle drifts on a symmetrical setup, on a more freeride setup, it's actually going to be more difficult to learn them on a board like this. A couple of the things I've noticed, because these are so popular now, people are starting to buy these as their first, like, expensive or real, you can call it, downhill setup. And you're seeing people who sort of throw themselves into a slide and kind of just do these crazy pendies or kind of just slide off the road and stuff like that. Or the opposite will happen and they're a little too hesitant and they'll go to slide and the ball will just flip and they'll high side. A lot of those things can be alleviated if you work on the basic forms and techniques of skating on a more middle ground setup. I mean, again, that's just my personal opinion. It's not what you have to do. Anyone can ride anything. You know, there's people that are free riding these things at top speeds. You know, anyone can do whatever they want. It's a free world for the most part. It's just kind of what I'm recommending as someone who's been riding this setup and has been skating for a long time. That's just something I've noticed, and you'd be much better off buying a sort of in-between setup, going to that 160mm width, or maybe a little narrower if you think you're ready for it, and starting off with something more like a 45-30 split and getting into that kind of feeling of split setups and slightly narrower trucks, and try and get out and ride mags or ride like a narrower square lug wheel like a rad or something, and really get used to those drifts on those big meaty wheels. And that's just going to make it easier for you to transition into these faster racing setups rather than jumping on this thing, trying to do it, and then struggling more than you would have if you'd put in the time on something else. Yeah, that's my piece. These things are super fun. They're really, like, I'm not a racer and I love riding this thing. I love, like, at the race in Vermont, I showed up, I didn't really race, but I was wearing my whole leather suit, I was riding this thing, I was pushing in, I was pushing myself, and this thing was awesome. So I do highly recommend these setups if you've been thinking about it. Hopefully this video helped you a little bit. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly and you kind of got some information maybe you didn't have and some better understanding. But that was kind of like a basic breakdown of these longboards that are now shorter than skateboards. But yeah, that's it, I guess.